Mr. Petri, what messages do you think Vice President Pence was sending? Has the US, by saying all options are on the table, has the US ruled out a preemptive strike at this moment?
No, I think what the Vice President is saying is that the time for talk is rapidly ending and the time for action is at hand in terms of stabilizing the situation on the Korean Peninsula and in the region of North Korea. We've been having six-party talks for a very long time. There's been no progress, and there's been repeated provocations by North Korea, and it complicates stability in the region and could lead to very serious consequences if there isn't a better understanding of controls or elimination of its nuclear program.
Mr. Shimatsu, how do you look at the current standoff between the US and the DPRK? Who have been the parties that have made the situation so messy by now?
Well, immediately, I think Vice President Pence's language has showed a moderation, desire to resume talks, but he does want to see some gestures from the DPRK, not to launch these provocative tests. He called it provocative. And so I think there is sort of an underlying, Pyongyang has been trying to get the attention of Washington, of the new administration. He's got the attention, so hopefully this would be a new beginning. As you know, there was scheduled quiet confidential talks were scheduled for New York between the North Korean representatives and the Trump administration for what's called track 2 diplomacy, informal diplomacy, setting up an office in New York. The Malaysian assassination knocked that off. So we do have, I think, an attempt here by Mike Pence to make a fresh start. So I think that's very positive right now.
In his press conference, Vice President Pence also blamed China's economic retaliation against so-called China's economic retaliation against the ROK over the deployment of the missile defense system, the THAAD. Let's take a listen to this.
A better path would be for China to address the North Korean threat that is actually making such defensive measures necessary. Now, while issues like that remain, the President and I have great confidence that China will properly deal with North Korea.
Mr. Petri, how do you look at China's role in trying to resolve the DPRK issue vis-à-vis the roles of the United States and those of its allies, including Japan?
Well, it's absolutely crucial because China is the country that has the most leverage and influence and is closest to North Korea, if anyone is. I think the very good talks between the Chinese president and the American president recently and the numerous exchanges at the high level are very encouraging, that we're going to see better coordination and again serious steps to resolve this situation once and for all. As our Secretary Tillerson recently said, that the time for talking is rapidly ending and the time for action is at hand. So I hope that, and I believe that China is going to be playing a crucial role in resolving this situation.
Well, the second part of my question, Mr. Petri, is also what do you think of the role of the United States in the whole thing, besides bringing aircraft carrier groups into the region and staging and continue the military exercises it is holding with the ROK?
Well, this is not occurring in a vacuum, and it's going forward with close coordination and consultation and actually participation by Japanese forces and talks with South Korea. There's a real threat to both those countries by the program that North Korea is engaging in. And you ask why they're doing it. They must be trying to do something like this, not just to get attention, but because they think it gives them stability. And there may be other ways of achieving that goal and removing the risk to the neighbors of North Korea.
Mr. Shimatsu, what do you think of what China has done so far? Is China the deal maker or breaker?
Well, I think China has put most of its attention on denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, but it's put the pressure on the northern side. And I think China is strong enough and respected enough and economically important enough power to ask much harder questions about South Korea's nuclear program. We do know that President Park's father had actually started a major nuclear program, which has continued in secret, uranium processing. And we do know that Japan, as revealed by the Hatoyama administration, broke its own 3 non-nuclear principles right from the beginning, allowed U.S. forces to store weapons in Okinawa for U.S. ships to bring nuclear warheads. And as we've seen with Fukushima, has developed massive amount of weapons-grade plutonium. The isotope cesium-137 is a signature of war-grade plutonium. So Japan has been really pushing a nuclear arsenal, and that has forced, I believe, Pyongyang to try to develop a very small deterrence capability. Japan's got 54 reactors, Korea something like 40 reactors. The odds are very much against the North, so they've tried to do a very highly publicized program to show that it will resist these secret programs. So I think China must address Seoul and Japan to put their cards on the table. So instead, we do need, instead of strategic patience, we need strategic honesty from all 6 parties of what their nuclear plans are really about.
Mr. Petri, now the Trump administration actually has made encouraging talks, let's say, for the ROK or other countries and Japan, for instance, to have their nuclear weapons. Now he's only talking about the goal of denuclearizing the DPRK. How do you look at this apparent inconsistency here?
Well, I think what we're concerned about is stability in the region, and the chance of some accident occurring and the loss of life. We know there's been tension on the Korean Peninsula for a long time. The people of Seoul are basically hostage, not even just to nuclear weapons, but actually cannon fire could wreak tremendous damage in that area. And so I believe, are quite concerned that we have a more serious approach to a long-term stability in the region to protect the people who are there and to reduce the tension that currently exists.
Also, Mr. Petri, now Vice President Pence didn't include China onto his itinerary this time. Why do you think is that? And is it because everything has pretty much been covered by President Xi and President Trump during their meeting in Mar-a-Lago, or is he trying to say something to its allies in the Asia-Pacific?
No, I don't think there's any intention of shortchanging China on this trip, but there just was at the very top level already very serious negotiations, and very, I think, successful from the point of view certainly of leaders in the United States, and new beginning with the Chinese leadership. We have a lot of business to do on the table. China is taking a greater role in the world. I think they deserve to be applauded for the action the Chinese Navy recently took over in Aden to rescue a ship under the threat of piracy. Constructive steps like this build a lot of goodwill, and I think it's in that context that we're trying to increase our working with China and other countries in the region to bring greater stability to the Korean Peninsula.
And Mr. Shimatsu, do you think the policy of maximum pressure will achieve its goal of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula?
Well, I think right now the American message is that Pyongyang needs to get back to talks. Not necessarily the 6-party talks immediately, but with Washington and more sincere talks with China. That this is what the pressure is about. Once that's established, I think then a program will develop. So, it takes 2 to tango here. Pyongyang has not been very cooperative, is trying to push its agenda. On the other hand, I think Donald Trump felt that there was an opportunity with the new administration for new talks to develop, and there's no point in making these sort of gestures, militant gestures. So I think both sides are having a little bit trouble of learning how to tangle with each other after these long, period of Democratic presidency. So let's hope they do establish that. And I think Mike Pence is the right man to set over to basically establish the new ground rules for the new game in town.
I hope they're just doing tangles and for quite some time to come. Many thanks to Thomas Petri, former U.S. representative for Wisconsin. And here is my first point. Now, with Trump's latest pronouncement on Russia making a 180-degree turn, he has once again flip-flopped on some of his most important policies. And with such unpredictability, it really is difficult for anyone to trust the intellectual elements behind his thinking. Some people are saying he is quick to learn and correct himself. Others would argue that it might have been better if he had kept his mouth shut in the first place, if he really didn't understand what he was dealing with. Now, with such unpredictability as the only consistency we have seen so far with the Trump administration, with the Trump presidency, it is difficult for anyone to take his policies seriously.